Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I have Justin L. Shaw, and he is the author of Sorcery 101, and that is source, as in Source, like being the source. And that is Sorcery 101, 13 Rungs to a Higher Elevation of Consciousness. So, how's it going today?
Great, great. Good to be here, there, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Magic of the internet.
Yeah, agreed. We're we have this ability to connect so far, yet we seem to be so disconnected. But I was having a conversation yesterday, and the disconnection seems to be actually more with ourselves. Um, and even though we have this ability to connect, that disconnection within selves, it acts almost like an isolator in a way, I guess you could say. It's easy to get isolated, and if you know about that kind of behavior, if you've ever had any addiction problems, you tend to isolate, and
Mhm.
that's not healthy. And so, yeah, it's the double-edged sword, and I think it's one of those things, like anything. One medicine a medicine has the ability to cure one person and kill another. And so, I believe our technology and internet is similar. But yeah, let's get it started. So, how where did you grow up, and kind of what was your childhood like? Because like I was explaining before we started the interview, we're starting to see that our upbringing, childhood experiences, generational trauma, those belief systems that our parents have passed down from their parents and their parents have whittled their way into our lives, and they seem to manifest as trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression. And until we get that figured out and look back, it makes it difficult to address. So I always like to start with a little bit of upbringing. So, what was your upbringing like? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, that's always a good place to start. I certainly, when I'm working with people and when I was struggling the most, I always like to know who I was speaking to has empathy rather than sympathy for me. Two different things. Sympathy is, hearing someone's pain, whereas empathy is feeling it with them. And I've certainly been through my fair share.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of in this journey, I started. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale. It's where I'm still at. I like it here. I've lived in other places, but this is kind of home. I like the heat. But the atmosphere I grew up in was, I like to say there's a lot of pop culture in my book because I was kind of raised in front of a television set, and I like to say it was like Fight Club in my home. It was you know the the first rule was you do not talk about your feelings, and the second rule was you do not talk about your feelings, right? Like, so that was something that was just ingrained. My dad was around more when I was younger, but they were much older when they had me, so they were already married for quite a long time. And there was a crack in the marriage when I came along, and it just continued to morph into a canyon.
What's your
So
ethnicity? Because I know Phoenix, Arizona, you're going to have a large Latino population, and sometimes um, racism, or as it's evolved, it's still kind of the same, but it definitely does have that impact. I mean, for me, I was one of very few Latinos in a small white Bible Baptist town. So,
yeah,
uh,
oh yeah, no, it absolutely matters, for sure, because but in my case, I'm a whole bunch of white. There's just a whole bunch of just a mutt of white, certainly. So that really wasn't didn't experience that as much growing up, certainly. But there was a lot of just it just was just an emotional vacuum is what I like to call it. It was mostly just me and my mom, and she was going through her own pain and trauma of the divorce and had her own difficult childhood to deal with. So she was not doing well through the years, like when I came along. My brothers and sisters are much, much older. Like I said, they were much older parents, and everyone was moved out of the house when I came along. So it was just me and my mom in the house. And we just kind of were kind of secluded to our rooms. Like that's really what I remember most about childhood. I was in my room and she was in her room, and that's how the TV
Yeah.
was not my babysitter. It was a full blown parent.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, that's where and that's why I memorized all these amazing things of, the 90s and all the amazing, the funny movies of that time period. I would just
Hmm.
watch over and over and over and over again. And the Saturday Night Live of that era, the Adam
Oh
Sandler,
yeah.
David Spade,
I've
Chris
been
Farley
reminiscing about
era.
the 80s lately, man. They were such a good time of I don't know if the world was I don't know if it was we were just kids. The world was in this kind of blind and weird kind of poppy place, but like the 80s, it's like you come out of Vietnam and all this stuff and you have this change and you have neon colors and big hair and it just seemed like it was very hunky dory.
Yeah, yeah, no, it absolutely, yeah, and that was that era. I was very, very young. I kind of entered my adolescence there in the 90s, and that's when, I just really started. That's when my memories really started. I remember some of the 80s. I was born in the 80s, so
Mhm.
I would definitely remember some of it, but the 90s were really, that's what I remember the most, certainly. So it just and that was my upbringing, was just the pop culture of that day. And so there just wasn't, love was not something that was mentioned in my home. There wasn't a lot of hugging or anything like that. So I had a very weird relationship with that word um growing up, and even still now that programming is in there, that it's just something that was never said. So it felt weird to say.
Yeah.
And it was something that I had the strangest relationship with it, because I didn't really experience it growing up. I just was kind of there. It wasn't bad. My mother wasn't abusive in any sort of way, verbally, or it just was neglectful. I've learned that there's two different types of trauma. There's big T trauma, capital T trauma, which is just these knee-jerking events of, sexual abuse, physical abuse, which I didn't experience growing up. And then there's this lowercase T trauma, which is this slow burn of like emotional neglect, and that's what got me. Um,
And do
so
you
that
think
that's
was it were her parents kind of similar? Was that a learned behavior, like whether it was
Oh
the
yeah.
discussion of love or not
Yeah,
mentioning
yeah,
it?
out of the four grandparents, three of them had passed before I was born, but the one I knew was my mother's mother, and she was a bad alcoholic and a very unpleasant woman. She always reminded, I don't know if anyone's ever seen, Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's one of my favorite shows, but Mac's grandmother, just kind of the chain smoking, drinking,
Hmm.
like, hey, that was my grandmother. It was never pleasant going over there, like, good to see you, kiddo. Like, I mean, it's just that was my mom's mom. So it made all the sense in the world to me as I got older that she was the way she was. And she wasn't one to drink or do. She was, my grandmother's raging alcoholic, chain smoker. My mother did none of that. So it
Right.
obviously turned her off. But where she went, was inward. And she had a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, and just liked to be alone a lot. And that's what I experienced. So that was just tough, when
And
you
you
don't tell
almost
a child.
model it as kids, we model our parents' behavior.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And if you don't tell a child that they're loved and valued and safe, then they're going to look to the world for those things. And the world is always going to tell them that they're unloved and unvalued and not safe. So
Yeah,
that's
and
what I
or
experienced.
you end up running into a pedophile who's going to tell you you're loved and safe, and
Yeah,
yeah.
that's certainly the other way that things could have went. And thankfully they didn't go in that direction. But yeah, and that's where, the whole thing can, that's, it's so important in childhood. All our beliefs are kind of put in place by age 7. And so, that's a really important kind of age range. We can always understand how to, now I understand that, those beliefs are not permanent and set in stone, but we have to understand that they're there, and we can deconstruct them, which is what I've been doing. And it's really exciting, that kind of stuff I've been doing with myself, and I've excited to
Yeah.
share it with people, certainly. But my childhood is what led to the dumpster fire of my
Did you
20s, right?
recognize
Like,
it as a child while you were in it? Like, were you aware that maybe this isn't normal? Like, from whether or not you had friends and you see other people with two household relationships and stuff like that, or yeah, two parent relationships. Did you
Yeah.
notice it? Were you aware of it?
Yeah, I was aware of it, and it was different, and I saw kind of the difference between as I got older, I saw it more. I as as I kind of got 10, and that's when I kind of started noticing things a little bit more. And just the relationship that other kids had with their parents, and this word love that they exchanged with their parents, like
Hmm.
that was not something I was used to. My mother, we never wanted for physical things, or there was never worry about food on the table. So the way it wasn't that she didn't love me, it's that she doesn't
Right.
know how to express it. So she did it through buying me things. That would be our time together. Would she like, she'd take me clothes shopping, or go out to eat. She didn't like to cook. She was done with cooking. So we
Yeah.
went out to eat a lot. So we'd be in our room separately. We'd go out to eat for dinner, and that was our time together, and then we'd go back to our rooms. So that was it, and that's what I was used to. So I didn't know any other way.
Yeah.
But
It-
but it was that kind of living that led to a lot of drug and alcohol addictions in teens and 20s,
so
and
you started
just
in your teens.
struggle.
That's kind of where I was going was did recognizing this and feeling it and maybe, and the reason I ask about the awareness is because, as children, um, we're we might be aware, but we don't know how to express. We don't know the feeling, and it often manifests in um, behavior. Whether we're getting in trouble or something like that. And so, we're when did you when did that start manifesting for you, and how did it manifest?
It was an attention thing. That was how it first started. Before drugs and alcohol, there was this draw for kind of to be the class clown and to make people laugh and to get kind of in trouble at school. And that was middle school really, is when because I wasn't getting any attention at home, and
Right.
I got fine. I didn't do they weren't good grades, but they weren't bad grades either. So
Right.
it just I was getting absolutely no attention at home. So what got me attention finally was getting into trouble and doing mischievous things, and playing
Yeah.
pranks on teachers, and that stuff. But that attention high I got from the classmates was my first jolt of, oh, this
Yeah.
feels good, this is nice. And so that attention is what I kept trying to get. And I would try to be the wildest partier. I would steal copious amounts of alcohol from grocery stores, and that got me lots of friends, right? Like,
Right.
because I just had no fear. I mean, I would go into a place, I would just load up a whole cart full of alcohol, and just 16, 17 years old, and just walk out. Like, I'd load it with some food so we could have some food, and then we'd find whoever's house was available, and we'd charge people sometimes we wouldn't. All my closest friends would drink for free, and I was always the hero. And so that kind of that power
Yeah.
addiction, and that was much more powerful than even the alcohol and the pot we were smoking at the time. I got into heavier drugs as I went on, but that's where it always starts, right? Is the alcohol and pot. So early on in high school, that's all it was. But then it started getting into other drugs too. But as per partying, like that's and I never, I just, and I loved stealing. I
Yeah.
loved the, like, even it was the attention I get after stealing, and then even the rush during stealing. Like, I would get
Almost like
this
the get away with
euphoric
it type
rush.
thing.
Yeah. 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 You're not supposed to do something, like that's
Yeah.
that whole
Did you have any
mischievous
run-ins with the
thing.
law during your high school years?
Yeah, finally I got caught because I went in, and I was greedy and I was stupid because I did a beer run. I never did it drunk before, and this is the first time I'd done it drunk, and I obviously did it sloppily because I got caught. And so it wasn't a big deal. I believe I was either on the border of being 18 or just turned 18. I don't know, it was like senior year, but it was just kind of a slap on the wrist kind of thing, for, misdemeanor kind of, ticket type situation. So I kind of did that and got it erased. And then I didn't stop. I was just a lot more careful from then on. And then eventually, that behavior stopped, but I still kind of did it in college a little bit. But in high school, it was rampant.
So,
So.
as you transition out of that and you're going into college, where are you? Like, what are you thinking? Like, what are your intentions like with your life as a is a young man who starts to understand that, hey, I like attention, and how am I going to get that? I mean, a lot of people, it's weird because, whether or not we think about it in that way, there's a subconscious part of like little kids, like, I want to be a football player, I want to be a rock star. So it has to do with that attention. But, what was your young mind thinking? What were you going to college for? What did you think you were going to be doing? And how did that experience go?
Yeah, it was I was hoping my kind of goal in the long term was to be a stand-up comedian. That's what I wanted to
Okay.
do, but I also had a goal inside of me to just simply graduate college because that's just something I wanted to do. I wanted to go to Arizona State, and I'd always been a fan
Hmm.
of the team growing up, and I wanted to go there and I wanted to graduate with no kind of goal or vision after that other than to try to make it in Hollywood, which obviously you don't need a college degree
What
for.
was your major?
Communications.
Okay.
The,
Yeah, and I was thinking
the
like English, communications, anything that
Mhm.
helps you write and or speak. I was like, at least you're like, hey, I want to, at least you're on track.
Yeah, something. I knew,
Yeah.
yeah, and communications was the GPA for communications was doable. 2.5, it was like I can manage that. I think I
Yeah.
graduated with like a 2.6 or 2.7. It wasn't much above that because I didn't I did, they don't say hard work ever killed anyone, but I figured, why take a chance? Like so it was that kind of mentality that kind of squeaked me through college in 5 years, not four, of course.
Well, what was the
But
college experience like? I mean, so you get there. Now, do you live off campus, on campus? Are you living at home within the same distance? I'm not familiar with too much geography other than Tempe and Phoenix. Um,
yeah, they're close. So my childhood home is about 20 minutes from Tempe, but
okay.
I was able to get into the dorms, which is a really cool experience. And I did the dorms my freshman year, and then sophomore year I did the fraternity thing, and I lived there. And shockingly, I got kicked out of living at the fraternity for some reckless partying ways, which is insane. Like to get kicked out like for like reckless partying. It'd be like getting kicked out of the satanic temple because your views are too extreme. Like
Yeah.
it's it's like, yeah, you're too much partying. But like it was just an instant where I sent pledges to go develop some film back when we developed film.
Yeah.
This is back in the new 2003, I think. And they were the film had, like us doing drugs, just coke
Yeah.
and things. And so the film place called the cops, and the cops showed up, and luckily the pledges weren't in the pictures, but they kicked me out because of that. So it's just so funny that like a fraternity kicks you out for your reckless partying. It's like, well, that's extreme right there. That's extreme.
Yeah.
But
So what was so you're going to school. School's kind of its thing, but you mentioned this is kind of where you dive deeper into maybe some drugs and alcohol. Where, I mean, I went to college and I'm familiar with the pledge experience. I wasn't in a fraternity because I was in the military. But yeah, the military is much the same way. Um,
mhm.
in that drinking, partying is a part of the culture, and um, yeah, and so I know it goes around, but in kind of the military side of things, there wasn't a lot. It was all strictly alcohol. There was no drugs, but I know in the fraternity side, it can be different, and they kind of promote that party. And I know that college is a place of experimentation, availability. So how and what were you introduced to during that time?
Yeah, there was all the kind of designer party drugs, the
Hmm.
ecstasy, cocaine, all the psychedelics, the mushrooms and the acid and stuff, and those things were all kind of those ended up all being kind of experimental for me, and not as much of a necessarily problem. Certainly, weed was something I did every single day.
Right.
That was without question,
Now,
and
did you ever use the
alcohol.
psychedelics within tension? I know like it was an experimental phase, and I just interviewed a psychedelic integrator yesterday, and that's kind of why I'm asking is when I had my first psychedelic experiences, I don't think I had intentions or was looking. It was more like, well, let's kind of see what this is about. But then I think, you know, the fact that you wrote a book that dives deep into elevation of consciousness shows to me that you're seeking something further beyond. And psychedelics is kind of has that notion of being attached to that. And I know, later on psychedelic experiences, it's more about using it as a tool and whatnot. But was it just strictly experimentation then? Or did you have or were you actually seeking something more in that time?
Oh no, I was just trying to get high. I was just trying to get outside of myself. Anything they could have given me anything at that time, and I would have taken it. And so that was fun. But yeah, and I have done it with intention, and it has been healing. I've done ketamine sessions
Mhm.
and later in life. But in that time in my life, I just wanted to get like tripped out and watch Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
Like that's what oh, look at that's it, it
it
had
was
there
more
was
about
no.
the visuals and less about the consciousness part of it.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. It was just about the visuals, the goofy feeling, like, having fun with your friends. There was absolutely no intention. That was the intention. So, but yeah, that's kind of my beginning into it. But then it got kind of into the pills, which did become a major problem. And surprisingly, between legal and illegal drugs, it was the legal ones that became the biggest problem for me. I'd been prescribed things like Adderall and Xanax for kind of my mental, emotional, spiritual issues before in high school, and I really liked them. But in college, it really kicked in, um, and I like the downers a little bit more than the stimulants because I've always had a high anxiety anyways. So
Right.
if I would never do stimulants if I didn't have downers to do afterwards, but I could always do downers without stimulants. So um, the Oxycontin, that was the huge, that was, the big Purdue Pharma. That was like I was like the height of it is when I was in college. So those were just so easy to get. The Oxycontin 80s, and if you ever watched Dose Sick, like you'll know what kind of some of us went through back then. But Xanax and Oxycontin, and that's what really got me, and that's what I went once I graduated college. I don't know how I did. I was
Yeah.
high, and I was high on the graduation. My girl next to me had to like nudge me out of my seat because I was like nodding out.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So and then so I moved to LA with this huge drug problem, and I moved to like the drug capital of the world. So guess what happened? My dreams did not come true. So that's when everything became kind of that was when everything was at the worst. It was kind of mid 20s to late 20s, and as I was living there, and to be a stand-up comedian, I found out that you have to get through a set standing up,
Yeah.
and that was tough to do when I was ingesting as much of benzos and opiates to concern even Keith Richards. So
So
it's
when you
just
went out there, was it easy to find a connect?
oh yeah, yeah, that was pretty easy. I had moved in. I had moved over with an ex-girlfriend who introduced me to some people, and so that was pretty easy to do and find. So yeah, drugs were not hard to find, and so
Did
it
you
just
ever
it
did you
just
ever think
spiraled.
about after the graduation in between moving to LA, did you ever like give a consideration like maybe I should quit? Like what if I can't get it out there? But in a way it's kind of like going, I know it's out there.
No,
Um
I moved out there to quit. I moved out there. I was like, if I move out there, of course, wherever you
yeah,
go, there you are. So I moved out there hoping I would quit, but then I just ran into the same things as I found, of course.
yeah.
And I was still not healed or even trying to heal. So it's just like, oh, drugs. Yeah, I remember this. Let's go. And I guess I'm not quitting.
And what were you doing?
So,
Did you have a day job and doing open mics, or how did the stand-up comic thing go? What was that like pursuing, chasing the dream?
it was just open mics. Like I never got paid. I would just do open mics. And I had a day, I worked at Universal Studios.
Okay.
So, just a day job there. That was an experience certainly, but yeah, it was never anything. I never got to where I wanted to go, or like I was too nervous to go like Laugh Factory or places like that.
Yeah.
It was just kind of bars and things. I was trying to build my comfort level, but I eventually got to the point where I couldn't even function to go do that. So
Right.
like it was just that eventually went to the wayside, and I had to eventually go to rehab
Okay.
out there.
So it was actually the drugs are kind of what took over and kept from that.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
And so where was that? what was that rock bottom moment that made you submit and say, I need help. I'm gonna go to rehab and I'm gonna ask for help because I know like that's fucking hard.
Yeah, I mean it's when I just realized I had no money. I had, I was like I had to spend the Disneyland novelty dollar I got it at Disneyland, my little like Buzz Lightyear novelty dollar. I like peeled the sticker off it and had to use it as a real dollar. Like that was the moment it was just like, okay, I am really in some dire straits. I only had a head over I experienced some bouts of homelessness, never for too long, because my mother would like I'd be embarrassed to like call back
Right.
and say I need help again. So I just spend nights homeless. But it was just bad. It was bad. I'd get kicked out of halfway houses or whatever for using, and then I just wouldn't call back home. And so that was after the first rehab experience of like and so then I went back home, and the second rehab experience is what kind of kicked in started the spirituality for me.
So the first
So
rehab was actually in LA.
yeah, it was. Yep.
Okay, and then you came back to Arizona for the second time.
Yep.
What was the um what was your experience like at rehab the first time? Like in terms of um going in nervous, you want to do this, you know it's going to be uncomfortable. What was that like?
Yeah, that was it, it was very nerve-wracking, and it was really cool to see. I had experienced a healthy body like my whole it felt like my whole life. But there were times but like I couldn't remember what a healthy body even felt like. So as
Right.
my body was healing and getting rid of these horrible things in my system, like my bowels were functioning
Yeah.
normally, and like these normal things, and my skin started to look better. One thing I loved noticing was that everything looked more colorful. Like it's after you do drugs for so many years in a row, like the colors start to dull, and like I started to get sober, and like colors started to look better. And so all these like physical things, I wasn't really working on my spirit, which is why the first time didn't work. But I did really like feeling
What was
sober.
the
I
what was the
liked.
detox like? Was it rough? What did they give you
Oh
medicine to
yeah.
help it, or was it just a cold turkey
No, they
laying
had.
in the bed sweating?
Yeah, both. I mean, anything they had to help it, like you're still coming off the drugs, it helps a little bit. But the whole detox, they have you in a detox unit first, where they kind of give you some kind of comfort meds to help you come down. Of course, they don't get you high, they just kind of make it a little bit more bearable. And then they'll move you into like the residential portion, and then that's where you get no drugs. Well, other than, of course, it's always been funny to me. The medical community is, like they'll, I'll come into rehab ready to get off drugs, and they'll pat me on the back and congratulate me for wanting to get off drugs, and then tell me I should get back on drugs. Like so that that's that
Yeah.
whole SSRI, and it's these
Yeah.
other drugs that they want to get you back on. So certainly there's that in the residential side, but the comfort drugs and everything else, they phase those out, and then but they still let you be on all the other drugs in residential. So you're sober. It's sober. I mean, being on SSRIs or having,
Yeah.
that's considered sober, uh but yeah, it's always been straight. I've always had a weird relationship with the medical community because of that. It's because it's a healed person lines no one's pockets. So I mean, the whole thing is they're out to manage symptoms, and and that's what kind of this book is about. It's about healing, because the medical community will never understand chronic illness, and addiction is a chronic illness. Depression, anxiety, a lot of autoimmune disorders. These are all chronic illnesses that they can only manage the symptoms. They cannot cure. But there is a cure, and it's just the problem is focusing on the cure, which is that spiritual bankruptcy, which is what the book is all about. Once we focus on the core issue and healing that spiritual bankruptcy, things like addiction, it's like a side effect. It's like I don't want to use because I've now healed, and I'm now healing and thriving, and not wanting to use a drink is this amazing side effect. So the medical community is I always compare it to, so like if I and it's not to say bad, it's because people say, oh, well, you must not like doctors. Well, that's not
Right.
true. Doctors are an amazing thing, but it's just It's just if you have an acute injury, we in the Western world have acute injuries down. So like if I fall off a ladder and my arm is, my bone is sticking out of my arm, that's not a good time for meditation or to send
Right.
me, or the acupuncture is not going to do a lot in that moment, right? Like so we need doctors, but once the surgery is done and the bone is set and back in place, now the doctor's part is done. The body itself has the power to heal itself. What made the body heals the body. So what we have to do is figure out in terms of chronic illness, how to set the emotional slash spiritual bone. And that's what I'm out to do. Is to understand, get people to understand how to set, because otherwise the body cannot heal itself of this chronic illness without learning how to set the emotional bone. And so that's what this is all about now is trying to get this out there and I have a better understanding because I've done it to
Yeah.
myself of setting the emotional spiritual bone and letting the body heal itself and letting the mind and soul and spirit and everything, it'll heal itself, but you have to understand how to do that.
Well, and so
And so it's
so you went to rehab the first time, it didn't stick because you felt physically better, but you didn't address the spiritual. And
mhm.
then you said you went to rehab the second time, and this is where what you were just talking about, this spiritual setting of the bone that needed to be done. So between those two experiences, where did you gather that little window of information that this is what needs to happen? Um, how did you come up on that? And then how did you start to go, oh, okay, and now I'm going to do something about it? Because
So
you
it
just
actually
had kind of,
wasn't, yeah, yeah, no, it actually wasn't. So the first time it was just I didn't understand at all. I thought like once my body was clear, I wouldn't want to use anymore.
uh-huh,
That's just, and that's what happens with a lot of people. It's like, well, I'm sober now, I won't want to use again.
the
Once these
cravings go away.
withdrawals go away, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But what you don't understand is that's not how it works. And so the second time I had understood a little bit better. It was like, okay, there's a spiritual element to this, and I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So I went to a faith-based treatment center, and this is Christianity, and so. I really started to do that kind of AA Christianity thing,
Right.
which they go well together because AA is just kind of disguised Christianity. But there's some issues I had, and for years that worked. So it was like, okay, I'm sober now, but unfortunately, the focus in those things is still on, it's on sobriety and not necessarily the thriving or healing aspect. So I was sober, but
Yeah.
I still wasn't healed. So, my addictions kind of switched to, I was, a relationship, sex, that it kind of went in that direction. Working out was another big one. And
Yeah.
and so, I liked vaping and, so there's things that I still did during that time period. But, I realized my time in Christianity, it's like, and the problems with it I had, and again, the world is a world of gray. There's many good things about it, but there are
Right.
some things that are not so good about it. And I realized that Christianity is like this amazing mansion, right? It's like a 15 room, 14 bathroom mansion with, an indoor pool and movie theater and all these amazing things. It's great inside the mansion, but they don't let you go outside the mansion. And they tell you that, outside the mansion is death and destruction. It's a zombie apocalypse out there, and
Mhm.
you can't, and if you go out there, you can't come back in. So, and so there's this fear of like, I got to stay inside the mansion because they tell me, that there's zombies out there and
Yeah.
I don't want to die. So, like I stayed inside the mansion for those years,
Because
but
almost true Christianity would be like, no, we need to go outside the mansion and talk to the people and share this good word, and I can come back to the mansion and with guests.
well, that's kind of that's trying to get other people inside the mansion. Outside the mansion is other religions, and that's what they don't want you to experience.
Ah,
Is like all these other ways of thinking, and the kind of shamanistic approach and energy healing, and
mhm.
any other religion. Like if you mess with that, you're going to hell. You're gonna die, and you're gonna go. You don't want to mess with that. So that's what they tell you, and they programming you with. But what I realized that once I was living inside this mansion for long enough, my mother got terminally ill and sick, and my programming was that because she was a Christian, she was going to hell. So I realized this mansion is built on a cracked foundation of fear and judgment, and you can't see that cracked foundation when you're in the mansion, but eventually it started to crumble. And the year I went through with her dying was hard enough, but having this programming of she's going to hell because she didn't go to church was just absolutely killed me and just absolutely traumatized me. It took me right back to drinking and using. It was I realized that this Christianity is worthless because this now programming me and this is making me want to go back out and use and drink because of all this stuff that you've put in my head. So that's when the real healing actually started to happen was these series of events in adulthood of capital T trauma. My mother, I had a sister die, I had a close childhood friend die. I was in a toxic relationship with an infant son. She took off. She moved to across the country, cut me out of life. I haven't seen him for 2.5 years. Like I had
You
all
have your
things
son,
happen.
or
Yeah,
she took
yeah.
him? Okay.
She took him. Yeah. So, like I haven't seen him talk to him in a long time. And it's not to say woe's me. It's just I understand pain. And these things brought me to kind of this place of, I kind of, it's one of those moments where you kind of look up. It's like, things really aren't going so well right now, and I need some direction. And that's when over time this whole kind of healing system came to me, and where, like the book, and this is what you're gonna
How
do.
did it come? What kind of events transpired? What kind of maybe signs or things showed up in your life that give you the direction?
There was a couple events. There was before my ex took off, kind of in the middle of everything, a little bit about 4 years ago. It was after COVID, but I started seeing a shaman, and this is me leaving the mansion, leaving the Christianity mansion, because it's like I'm out. I don't care
So
if you guys
even
don't let me
before your
back in.
mother passed, you had already you're already flirting with like this served me and got me here, but this isn't working. There's more.
Right.
Okay.
There's more. Yep. So I started leaving the mansion. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to doing this church thing anymore. I'm going to try this other thing.
And
So I saw a shaman.
what led you to the shaman versus, let's say, I mean, because there's so many different things. That's kind of what I'm asking.
Well, it was just my experience with the whole religion thing was that it seemed like it was very controlling and just,
Hmm.
it was very shaming. It was just a shame-based, judgment-based, fear-based thing that was like, I don't think my idea of God is anything like this biblical thing of
Right.
God at all, even remotely close. So those were really realizations I was already having. So I came in, and my 2 weeks with the shaman did more for me than, 20 years of therapy or Christianity or anything. It's because we started meditating, and I started deconstructing beliefs that were put in me both as a child, which is the shadow work I speak about in the book, but it's deconstructing these beliefs of when I was a child and through that were placed into me as an adult in Christianity. All these limiting false beliefs and doing this meditation, and I had at that point what it would be best described as a bliss attack. It was a drug free. I was not on any drugs at the time. I was weeks clean of drugs, and it was this moment that it was like a panic attack if you replace panic with love.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it came out of absolutely nowhere. And it was 3 hours of just this euphoric ecstasy feeling. Meanwhile, while I'm being fed these kind of truths about reality and all these things coming, the kind of the illusionary way of reality and how we're doing everything wrong, and like there's just all these amazing things started coming to me. And I knew them as truth because of how I was feeling in the moment. And so, I realized that we're all in airplane mode. I think we're born out of airplane mode, and sometime around 7 or 8, we start to the society starts to program us, and airplane mode is turned on, and a phone perpetually in airplane mode is not living up to its
Updating.
potential. So
Hmm.
and I just realized that I was off airplane mode at this moment, and that's when things kind of got planted in me that was like, okay, I need to help others get off airplane mode because this is the key to have a good life. This is the key is to get off airplane mode because once you're off, you can't turn it back on. And you can try, but
Right.
it doesn't work. That phone doesn't stop ringing. It's time to pick it up and do your hero's journey. So that was the main moment that kind of brought everything to me and was like, okay, this is the route you're going to go, and this it took a little bit. It wasn't all instantly at once, but it just that moment turned off airplane mode, and then all the now I'm open to signals. So the signals started coming in over a couple of year period, and And that's when it was like, okay, you're gonna write this book. You're gonna tell people about your experience. Don't run from not only don't run from your past, lean
Right.
into it. Lean into it because everyone's got struggles out there. And so lean into your past, see what, let people know, and then let people know that there is hope and go from the dope dealer to the hope dealer, right? Like and I was a pretty lousy dope dealer too, because I might have been the only person in the history of the world to lose money selling drugs, right? Because
They could probably
I
put you in
did
prison for that too.
I did them all. Like I didn't understand, but yeah, I'm a much better hope dealer now. So I was a lousy dope dealer, but that's what. But it's difficult because like you're kind of getting up here and showing hope, but for people that were where I was, it's kind of daunting to look at because it's a big journey, and but the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, and it's just when you cross the river of change, on the other side of that bank, you have to fight through an undercurrent of discomfort, and it's
Right.
really uncomfortable because you're rewiring your mind and getting, so there's all this neuroplasticity or even in my case, there's detoxing bodily from drugs, but you don't have to. It's not just drugs and alcohol. That there's so many things that we do to avoid pain today. The phone is the biggest one. I mean, that's people. I see people at the gym that, can't get through a set of leg extensions without like checking their Instagram. Like you can't. It's bad. It's like, if you can't just be, if you have, you're constantly being a human doing, is that's again one of those things. You're not letting that emotional bone heal. You're constantly being you got to be a human being in order to start the healing. And it's like in meditation, you're taking, if you're constantly in a convergent focus, which is what we're in most of the day. We're in a convergent focus now. When you're on your phone, convergent. You're at work, convergent. You're playing with your kids. We're constantly in convergent focus. And when you're in a convergent focus, you are telling source, that source energy, that the creator of everything, that you're busy, that you don't have time for it. And healing comes when you make time for it.
Hmm.
And so that is meditation. You're taking your convergent focus and you're doing a divergent focus, which is a broadening of the focus on everything. I compare it to like if you were to go up to a brick wall and you had your nose against the wall and you had a blindfold on, you take the blindfold off, all you're going to see is a blurry shade of red. That's it. But if you take a step back, okay, you make out a brick. You take another step back, okay, there's a few bricks, they're stacked. You take another step back, you see a wall. Okay, and then you go even further back, and then you'll see this wall is actually attached to a magnificent castle. And now you've achieved this divergent focus. But, like if you're walking around all day and all you see is a blurry shade of red, you have no idea you're staying in front of a castle.
Right.
So it's that kind of it's that kind of message that that's what I'm here to do and spread in this whole new journey for me, because I've gone through it, and it's really cool to be on the other side. But it's there, that source energy. Explaining source energy is like explaining water to a fish, right?
Right.
Like that's hard to do. How would you explain water to a fish? Well, it surrounds you. You move because of it. You breathe because of it. You wouldn't exist without water, and that's what source energy is. It is all right. It is our water, and we are the fish, kind of in that source energy.
So how does one when when you come to understand this, you're gonna write the book. You have 13 rungs, and so in any endeavor, achieving something requires action and steps and a process. What actions and process and steps habits were you doing to clear out that old way of thinking and adopt this new way of thinking? And are there any practices that you kind of are necessary to kind of bring all this in? And how does one obtain this? How do I get my own source energy?
Yeah, that experience, the bliss attack. That's what I want everyone to have. And there's a map to I. That's what I created, is a map. Everything I went through
Hmm.
to have this happen, I created this map. I kind of it's it's your journey. I'm just I like to consider myself a spiritual Sherpa, right? Like a
Hmm.
Sherpa's not going to put you on their back and carry you up to Everest. They're your guide. You can't get up to the top without them, but they're not going to carry you either. It's your journey, but there's a guide. So I consider myself a spiritual Sherpa, and the spiritual journey is even more daunting because there's no summit.
Right.
There's no summit, so you can't. We are infinite beings. We have infinite room to grow. So it's once you get complacent, it's like you got to be the shark in the ocean, and just realize that when it comes to spirituality, being stagnant is a killer. So but yeah, I kind of I envisioned it, and I knew there was a lot of information in there, and I thought of the 12 steps and AA, and there's some great things to AA, but there's some not so great things too. And so but I took that as a guide, and instead of steps, I thought, well, moving forward is good, but moving up is better because a
Yeah.
bird has a better perspective on things than a worm.
Oh,
So
and I know
so
you
the
mentioned something
rungs.
about the 13 too, because in some
Oh yeah, and the
cases,
13, yep, the
unlucky, but
13.
I consider it lucky. I'm a fan of
Well,
13.
that's it, and that's why it is. That's why it's there. 13 immediately. The 13 is going to make people start to deconstruct false beliefs because 13 is seen as such an unlucky number in society that we don't have 13 floors on in hotels. Like
I know.
there is a 13th floor where they call it the 14th floor, and it's gotten to the point of craziness. But the truth is that in tarot, 13 is known as it's death, rebirth, and transformation. It is the number of those things. And it's also a very divine number and said to bring good luck and prosperity. So, I go by Sorcerer 13 now. So it's that's kind of my little tagline. So it's but immediately you're starting to deconstruct beliefs with that. That's why there's 13. That's why that they're very specific. So it's like, oh, 13 isn't unlucky. Not only is it not unlucky, it's actually lucky.
Yeah.
So there's I want people to start. The whole thing I have of this whole sorcery thing is question everything. Like question what I'm saying to you right now. Like question everything. I want, one of the rungs is goats over sheep, and goats is, greatest of all time. And anyone who's done something great questions everything and they don't listen and go along with everyone just because
Yeah.
they question things and sheep do not. They just go along with everything. And there's a lot of sheep in the world. And if you want to be a sheep, that's fine. But I want people to start questioning things and start waking up and really come to their own conclusions and live by their own hearts and just not just accept things at face value.
Yeah. We've been
Um,
programmed. There's so much programming from everything, it's like, and too, with the period of time you grow up in, you even have to look at like, what was television like? What were they promoting? What were the storylines, the through lines? I mean, you could look at something like some different shows in the 80s that were family shows where it promoted togetherness and kind of this, hunky dory lifestyle of everything's great. Um, but yeah, I how all that influences and the programming that we have to break, not just from that, but from our parents, our grandparents, and their programming comes from everything that was around them.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is the shadow. So that's the first rung, and it's the first rung for a reason. That shadow work is a term by Carl Jung. That's, the shadow is this kind of reactionary side to us. That the shadow will react to a situation, a sorcerer will respond to it. And there's a big difference between the two. And so like I like to I always say my little tagline is a little bit Deepak and a little bit Tupac because
Mm-hmm.
that sums me up really well because it's like I in that side of me is always there, that shadow side that I went through that was created. And I always like to let people know, and that's what you want to start deconstructing is getting into the shadow. But you can't dislike, even though your shadow does dislikable things, you can't dislike your shadow. The way to deal with it is to love it. The best way to kind of look at it is, the shadow can either be driving the car, be a passenger in the car, or where you really want it is in the back seat. If it's driving the car, your life is just a dumpster fire, like it was for me. It was just a wreck. But if you're, these are people that can't hold down jobs, they can't hold down they're just complete wrecks. But if it's in the passenger seat, maybe they can, they'll hold down jobs, they do fine, and they're they're normal people in society, but maybe they can't hold on to relationships. They're not good with friends, or they're not good with romantic relationships, so their shadow it's too involved in their life. Anyone in a passenger seat is involved in that conversation. In the back seat, they're not quite as involved. They're just sitting back, and that's kind of, you want to check on it, just kind of how you doing back there, and give it some love every now and then. And I've learned to create some distance to it by naming it. And the way I've named it and the way I think about my shadow is, again, pop culture came in. It's the movie True Romance. There's a little cameo character by Brad Pitt called Floyd. And Floyd he's only in it for just a few scenes, but Floyd is basically he's just this stoner couch dweller. The more central character in the film, that the homeowner lets him stay, because he's obviously like a brother to the character, and but he doesn't, Floyd, Brad Pitt's character, doesn't do anything. He doesn't pay rent. He doesn't do chores. Every scene is him stoned on the couch. Every single scene. So, that's the way I like to see my shadow, is like, it doesn't add a lot to my life, but it is a brother that was created in a time of need, and I'm going to love it and let it stay. Um, but the truth is, it doesn't add a lot to my life. But that's how we have to approach the shadow. Because if you start to not like the side of you, and a lot of people with like anger issues, that's the shadow emerging,
Mhm.
like reacting in situations, angry. And, like if you get angry that you're getting angry, well, what's the point of that? You haven't solved anything, like, so
Yeah,
you can't get angry that you're getting angry. You got to go deeper than that and find, what is the reasons for this? Because it's never the situation that you're getting angry at. A spouse
I
coming
always
home,
say that I realize, like, lately, many things that I get angry at it, I'm not angry at the thing or someone else. I'm actually mad at myself because I either made the same mistake twice, trusted the same person twice, or because I feel like if I trust somebody and they take advantage of me, I don't blame them. I blame me for being a fucking sucker. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. No, it can't. It's never, like, it's never about the dishes. Like the spouse can come home and start yelling about the. It's never about the dishes. But if you go deeper, I mean, it could be even deeper than that. It could be you're still angry at your father for leaving when you were young. And
Yeah.
that's coming out all the time in every aspect. But unconscious people are just like, well, he pissed me off. What do you want me to? But it goes deeper than that. Like it's like you're not actually mad at that situation. Like, yes, I am. That's no, he pissed me off. No, you gotta go. You gotta go
Yeah.
deeper than that. There's stuff there that you're not dealing with,
Well,
that you're
especially too,
putting
because
off.
I think if you understand, like, you know, if you once you, I think, understand, like, you and I, we're the same. We want to love and be loved. We have trauma, we hurt, we have pain. We want to make the world a better place. Has nothing to do with our religion, skin color, gender, anything. And I think, kind of, once you understand that, then it's easy to go, like, no, like, I'm not mad at this person who just did something stupid. You can kind of deconstruct it and realize, like, no, they're just a person too, and they probably didn't mean it that way, or maybe they did, but they're reacting too. You know, they're broken too.
Yep.
We're all
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
bunch of broken people. Like, I think once you really understand and can see, like, your own pain, it's easier to see the pain of others out in the world.
Oh, for sure. And that's a big key. That's one of I think the third rung is, surrender to serenity. And that's about understanding human behavior better. And just, we're all just reflections of the environment we were raised in. Like we're just there's just a lot of, misprogrammed people out there. And I don't think there's no such thing as really good or bad people. They're just people making decisions on who they want to be every day. And it's not to see people as good and bad is just not the way to go, because there's good and bad in everybody. And
Yeah.
people don't want to say, oh, I could never do that or this or that, or
Mm.
but no, when there's a level of fear that you get to,
I
and
never say
you
never.
don't
I
you don't
said I would
understand what
never do
that.
something once, and I did it, and I was like, no, never say never.
It's
You will.
there,
If you
it's in
have to,
all of
you will.
us. And the natives used to say, or I mean, I still do. It wasn't used to, but it's the shadow and the divine. It's the light wolf and the dark wolf, and they both live in all of us. And the one that dominates is the one you feed more. So, the people doing very destructive things out there, and they're just feeding their dark wolves, whether they know it or not. And that's just going to come out subconsciously, and they're going to be very unpleasant people to deal with. But change is possible for anybody, but you have to want to do it. But that's a critical and you won't get angry at situations and at people when you start understanding that, and kind of, alchemizing your emotions, which is another wrong, emotional alchemy, and just understanding people better, and that you can actually turn these emotions. A lot of emotions have to do with people, and not liking this, or jealousy is something we can see people. We can experience fear. We can be offended by other people. But if you start digging, and kind of become more curious about others, and like why they're acting that way, and become curious about yourself. Why am I feeling this way
Hmm.
towards them? You can alchemize these emotions, and not only just let them go, but you can actually turn, your judgment in those negative, nasty hatred feelings into positive, loving feelings, and create empathy by just getting curious. And that's alchemizing your emotions, which is a big part of having a bliss attack, is learning to alchemize your emotions, and everything is found in curiosity.
Now, did this kind of going through this, discovering this, what did it do for you in terms of, like, let's say, addiction? Did it help you to understand it different? Do you associate it like, well, that's Floyd? Floyd's the asshole who wants to drink and take pills, and um, how did this process help with that piece of what was, resurfaced a couple of times in your life with the addiction?
Yeah, it's just that, it's that spiritual bankruptcy that lived inside of me, and it's just that side that feels unloved and fearful and anxious, and I want to just numb those feelings out. Uh, but being able to, alchemize the feelings instead of just like numbing them out has become huge.
What does
Like,
a
because
spiritual bankrupt person do? Like, if you were to file real bankruptcy, then there's a set of actions you have to take to correct that and get back in good standing and have a bank account and all that shit. So, what's the quote unquote when you're spiritually bankrupt? How do you reverse that?
that's what I wrote about. That's kind of like these kind of
So the
rungs and things,
steps.
and yeah, they're ways to get that back. And that's, I hope to, like, I've started working with people one on one, but
Mhm.
there's the book too, it's a formula. It's a map, and it's a way to get the spirit back, and it requires not just reading, but
Yeah,
obviously action
the work.
too. Yeah, the work. But yeah, it is absolutely possible. It's just hard. It's, like, the whole thing of becoming a sorcerer is extremely simple, but it's not easy.
And is this one of those things, like, if I, like, let's say I get the book and I'm interested in working the program and the steps, the blueprint, is it a different timeline kind of for everyone, or is there a pacing you should be on, or how does it work?
Yeah, no, it's completely up to people and what they're, struggling with, and everything is of equal importance, but some might require more attention than
Mhm.
others. There's things in there that's like, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I really need to focus on. This one, like, kind of comes more naturally. You know, Health is wealth is the fourth one, which is, just, take care of your body.
Yeah.
And that one kind of comes more naturally to me, so I don't have to focus on it as much. But there's things of other things in there that are going to require more attention because they're harder. But there's the time is just, it's completely up to the individual. But it'll become apparent which ones are in need, because there's no way to get through all of them. Just like, oh, I don't struggle with anything in here. Like, if you there's just no
Yeah.
way. I mean, like, I kind of created it, and I still know the areas, and I struggle, and and it's okay to struggle. It's
Yeah.
fine, but
And they
there's
kind of
still
shift
healing.
probably.
There's no healed, right? There's
Yeah.
no, like that broken arm with like, but you heal it, and so there's a scar. It's still there, but that's okay. That's much better than a gaping wound. That a lot of us, when it comes to trauma, the trauma just sits in our frontal lobe, which this is our consciousness generator, and it makes up our personality. It controls impulse control, our person, and just everything that makes us human is in our frontal cortex, and that's where trauma sits in clouds. So this is about like clearing that out so that you can become a human again and you can become you, the real you. And so and to have that scar there, that's okay because once you're able to like disconnect a traumatic event with that reactional emotion, now you've alchemized your trauma into wisdom. Now that scar is just simply wisdom. It's a reminder. It's wisdom. But the problem is, that's that PTSD and those things that get stuck in us and they start causing that reaction, and we're reacting to things that aren't there. We're reacting to events of the past in the present, which is making our future not great.
Yeah.
So that's that key is to disconnect that emotional charge from the memory, and now it becomes wisdom, and that's the world needs more wisdom. I think we can all agree.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, so what outside of the book, so you have the book and you're doing some coaching with people, some one-on-one work.
Mhm.
Do you do that kind of together or like a kind of like a program in terms of like, hey, I want to work with you. You're like, let's get the book and you go through it together, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's all up to them. I always suggest the book because there's a
Hmm.
lot in there. The audio and a lot of people, it's hard to sit down and read, which is why I recorded the audiobook, which is it's going to be out probably the next couple weeks, which is exciting. I don't know, by the time this is out, it might be out, but uh, which is and it's a lot of fun because I get to do impersonations and there's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of jokes in my book. Like there's a lot of humor because I consider myself a mystical comedian. So it's the sessions together are very fun and the book is very fun and funny. So it's twice as fun as a therapy session at half the cost. So it's and the first session is always free because you got to build a vibe.
Hmm.
So I always like to do the first session free, but it's always suggestible to do it because it's building that. But it's also their time. So some people, they just want a session where they just want to vent and talk and okay, cool. Like let's just do that. There's other times when they want kind of more interaction with me or an equal interaction, but it's always up to the person and what they want. But yeah, the best is when you can work the book in together and do this. This is all, new for me, but it's exciting and where it's going to lead and it's continues to get better and more effective. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback, which is great for me because it's a win-win, like
Right.
as iron sharpens iron, one person shapes another. No one person is helping the other person more. They're helping me just as much as, like
Yeah.
this is what I meant to do because I'm almost doing it selfishly. It's like because I'm doing it like because I'm helping me emotionally as well as helping them. Um, so it's a lot of fun and it's certainly what it's fun. It's follow your bliss and Joseph
Yeah.
Campbell and I found it and I'm following it. But that's what it is basically. It's just quick hour counseling sessions and hopefully you're working in the book too because that's when it gets really effective is when you can work the rungs in together and they're reading it and working them together and there's just things that gets and yeah over time like I haven't just only been a couple 3 months since the book's been out and I've been starting this business and stuff and but even just in that amount of time there's been people it's progress a lot of
Yeah.
really good progress so it's cool.
And what would you like to what do you have any further intentions, or is this going to be like, hey, let's get the business up and standing, get a good clientele, um, book, coaching? Do you plan on like a second book, workshops, anything like that?
Yeah, that's all coming together. I'd really like to get like the website is up now, but I want to do kind of webinars and I really want to do kind of a like lecture tours and stuff, which would be really fun because I
Hmm.
write these amazing meditations that are really powerful and cool. And so to be able to work that in and kind of do and work in the stand-up comedy too, because like
Yeah.
it's coming kind of full circle now where like I'm not interested in doing stand-up comedy anymore, just comedy, because
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't want to just go in and just make people laugh anymore because I just don't I want to make people think and feel as well. Think,
Right.
feel, laugh. Like that's what I'm about now. Think, feel, laugh. So you know that, and that's kind of, so I want to create something new, and I never liked going on stage at 10 p.m. at night and a bunch of drinking around and stuff like that. So I'm creating something whole new, this mystical comedy that's like, you know, have something, you know, earlier in the day on a weekend, and you know there's no alcohol involved, and it's just meditation, and you know that's something that doesn't exist right now. So
Yeah, it is
I just
different.
think, yeah, it's very different. It's, yeah, to bring people in and have meditation and then kind of do stand-up philosophy, right?
Yeah,
Like
well,
so.
because I took my wife to a comedy show for Mother's Day, and I got to interview one of the comedians, and yeah, I but agreed. Like we don't attend them often. I probably attended them more when we lived in Austin, and I drank. But you know, it's the same too. Like even if you wanted to work as a comedian, I mean, do you want to be on stage at 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. and all that kind of stuff? You know, it's like I have to think like at 48, like, well, what everything of the skills I have and what I'm passionate about and what I want to do, how does it fit in and how can I make it work? And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting concept, um, where people
Yeah,
could get like a comedic experience, but also people who are into stuff like this, and also understanding um, how laughter is healing.
very.
You
Yeah,
know,
I want to work in thinking and feeling along with the laughter,
well, because
and
you
yeah.
know, when I was super depressed, and before I kind of made a change for myself, um, a visceral laugh was uh, was my I could tell where I was at emotionally, whether or not I could get a visceral laugh, whether or not I was in a state of being that one could be produced. You know, if something was really funny and I laughed, I was like, oh, I'm kind of okay. But if something was funny and I knew it was funny and I was just an asshole about it and was like, no, it's not, I knew maybe that's my shadow self, the asshole who's capable of all the bad stuff. But yeah, you know, laughter was it was a measurement for me of, do I know where I'm at mentally, and because if I can enjoy something or not. Because my problem was I was so depressed, and the SSRIs gave me a flat affect and I didn't feel anything. I couldn't laugh, I couldn't cry, nothing. And I hated
Mhm.
that. I wasn't depressed, but I didn't like not feeling either.
Yeah, no, and that's, yeah, that's part of the problems with them too, is, you know, they can help. I don't want to say too
Yeah,
much bad about them, but like but there's another route. Like I don't take anything and I feel better than I have ever before. So there's another route, and that's what I'm exploring, and that's what I help other people explore. And if you're tired of, because there, no matter what, with these SSRI drugs and stuff, and or even other prescription drugs that are more controlled, like if, you know, if you're taking Klonopin every day, and you know, like that's really tough on your body and your mind. And so, and they're really not supposed to be taken every day. SSRIs are, because they take time to build up, but all
right.
of it has some nasty side effects. Like no matter how good it makes you feel, there every single drug is going to have some kind of side effect. Well, what if you can feel good without any side effects? Like that's what I want. That's what I want. I don't want all these side effects that, yeah, that you just, the SSRI is going to take you out and they numb you out, and you don't really have, there's got to be other options, and there is. It's just you just there's it's more work. You know, that's the thing with taking a pill, right? You just
Yeah.
pop, drink. Okay, there's no work involved in that at all. It's really easy.
Well, in the
But
long term thing of like, you have to think about like people, oh man, like what what if, I don't know, your town's destroyed by a hurricane and you can't get medicine and you really need it. You
mhm,
know, part of like I've lost
reliant.
64 pounds, all this stuff. Yeah. I mean, I have tried to make myself as less reliant on as little as possible, because you just don't know. And
Yeah,
and that's kind of one of those things, and that whether that relates to your physical health, your mental health, all of it. Um, because kind of like you said, I mean, yeah, it requires more effort and more work, but the long term reliability of it is much better, because you know medicine not necessarily reliable. I mean, I've seen people just with a high blood pressure medication, who they were taking it for 12 years, and all of a sudden their body picks it up as an allergy one day, and they have, edema in their mouth, and their face is almost swollen, and they can't breathe, all over a blood pressure medication. And so, yeah, I was a healthcare manager, so I'm very familiar with symptomatic treatment and getting people in every 3 months. If you're on this drug, because we need to check the kidneys and we need to do this, and it's like,
All very treatable stuff with what I'm talking about here. Like
well,
high
but the
blood
thing
pressure and
is
stuff. It's like
we don't
just,
we don't
like
we don't make
calm.
any money till you see 18 patients. So, every doctor needs to see a minimum of 18 a day. So we prefer that they're seeing 24 to 27 a day, which leaves you with 10 to 15 minutes a patient. And how are you getting to a root cause in 10 or 15 minutes? You're not.
And you're not leaving you never leave a psychiatrist's office without a prescription. No, like they're not going to tell you, well, I think you've got some energetic imbalances and I think your chakras might be off and you should probably see a shaman. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So like it's up to us to understand these things, and there are other options, because if you go to a doctor, they're going to say, yep, you need pills, because they want the repeat business. They're going to manage your symptoms and hope that you keep coming back. They're never going to tell you you have energetic imbalances, and maybe there's more healthy routes that's not going to happen. So it's up to us to understand that there are other routes.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a great reminder, to take care of yourself, and understand that, be it your mental and or physical state of being, that you are the source, that it needs to come from you. And, outside of maybe some spirituality and things of that nature, most of what you need is inside of you. You just
Yep,
have to
agreed.
you have to figure out how to access it. And it takes time, it takes practice, it takes work, and not giving up, which is much more difficult than swallowing a pill.
Much,
Yeah,
but it's there.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. It was an enjoyable discussion, and like I like to tell everybody, I like to leave them with the message of go out and be the person that you would want to meet.
Yep.
Let that,
Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I always say, hey, if you want to meet cool people, go out and be cool.
Yeah.
You go out and be an asshole, you're probably gonna run into similar people, right?
Hmm. Exactly.
All right, man. Have a good day. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll send you an email when I get ready to release it.
Thank you so much. That's been great. Thank you.
Awesome, man.
All right.
Peace.
Let's go.
Asteroid of fear.